The tablecloth was a sea of white, impossibly white. Elara smoothed a hand over her simple black dress, the fabric thin and worn familiar against her skin. Her fingers trembled slightly. She tucked them into her lap, hiding them from view. Across the table, Mark smiled. It was a smile that belonged on a billboard, white even, and utterly without warmth. "You're quiet," he said, his voice smooth as the wine he'd ordered without asking her preference. Elara forced her own smile. "Just taking it all in," she managed to say. The restaurant was a symphony of hushed clinks and murmurs. Crystal glasses caught the light from a chandelier that dripped diamonds of glass from the ceiling. Everything felt expensive. Everything felt breakable, including her. This date was a mistake. She had known it the moment he'd named the place. Aveline, a name whispered with reverence among the city's elite, but she had been so tired of being alone, so tired of the four walls of her tiny apartment, the scent of turpentine and failure clinging to everything. So, she had said yes. She had spent an hour agonizing over her dress, the only one she owned that wasn't stained with paint. She had spent another hour practicing a smile in the cracked mirror of her bathroom, a smile that didn't look like a cry for help. Mark was still talking. Something about his portfolio, about a recent acquisition, about the sheer incompetence of his subordinates. Elara nodded, her mind a million miles away. Her mind was on the small, folded squares of paper in her purse. Coupons, carefully clipped from a free city circular she'd found at the library. 50% off one main course. Complimentary dessert with the purchase of 2 entrees. They felt like lead weights in her bag. They were her only way through this evening. She had no savings left. Her freelance graphic design work had dried up after her last client, her ex-boyfriend, had bad-mouthed her to his entire network, a petty revenge for leaving him. He had taken her money, her confidence, and her professional reputation in one fell swoop. What was left was a hollowed-out version of the woman she used to be, a woman who clipped coupons to survive. "So, what is it you do again?" Mark asked, interrupting his own monologue. He leaned back, a flicker of something dismissive in his eyes. "Art, was it?" "I'm a painter," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "And a graphic designer." "Right." He took a sip of his wine. "Not much money in that, I imagine, unless you're one of the greats." The implication hung in the air. "You are not one of the greats." Her chest tightened. She took a breath, the air tasting of roasted garlic and judgment. The waiter arrived, silent and efficient, to clear their plates. "Shall we get the check?" Mark asked, already pulling out a platinum credit card. He placed it on the table with a flick of his wrist. A statement. This is it. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. Her hands were slick with sweat. "Actually," she started, her voice a reedy whisper. She cleared her throat. "Actually, I'd like to contribute." Mark raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Don't be silly. It's a first date." "No, I insist," she said, her words a little firmer. This was part of her plan. Her dignity demanded it. She reached into her purse, her fingers fumbling past her keys and her lip balm. She found them, the crisp, folded papers. She pulled them out, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She placed them on the table, next to his gleaming credit card. They looked pathetic, flimsy, and cheap. Mark stared at them. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a small sound escaped his lips. A puff of air, a laugh. It started low, a disbelieving chuckle, and then it grew. It became a loud, braying sound that turned heads at the surrounding tables. "Are you serious?" he gasped, pointing a finger at the coupons. "You brought coupons? To Aveline?" Color flooded Elara's face, hot and shameful. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She started, but no words came. "Oh, this is priceless," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet room. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, cruel whisper. "Let me guess. You saw my profile, saw the car, the watch, and thought you'd hit the jackpot. But you couldn't even fake it for one night? You had to bring your little discount slips?" Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. "That's not it," she whispered, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "Save it," he snapped, his charming facade gone, replaced by a sneering cruelty. "I can't believe I wasted my evening on someone so cheap, so desperate." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "You know what? You can use your little coupons. You can have the whole damn meal." He snatched his credit card off the table. "Have a nice life," he spat, the words dripping with contempt. And then he was gone, leaving her alone at the table, alone with the bill, the coupons, and the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on her. The murmurs started, quiet whispers that felt like shouts. Her breath hitched, a tear escaped, then another, tracing hot tracks down her cold cheeks. This was it. This was her rock-bottom moment, humiliated, exposed, broken. She fumbled for her purse, her only thought to flee, to run out into the cold night and never look back. But a shadow fell over her table. She looked up, expecting the waiter with the bill and a look of disdain. But it wasn't the waiter. It was a man in a simple, dark suit, no tie. His face was calm, his eyes a startlingly kind shade of blue. He looked to be in his late 30s, with a quiet authority that seemed to emanate from him. He pulled out the chair Mark had just vacated and sat down. He didn't look at the other diners. He only looked at her. He gently pushed the coupons to one side. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady, a lifeline in her sea of shame. "Dinner is on me." Elara stared at him, speechless. She could only manage a choked sob. The manager she assumed, didn't flinch. He simply sat there, a silent, solid presence. He gestured to a passing waiter with a subtle nod of his head. The waiter understood immediately, clearing the bill folder and the offensive coupons from the table without a word. "My name is Julian," he said, his voice never rising above a calm murmur. It cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant, creating a small bubble of quiet around their table. Elara wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, feeling childish and exposed. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You didn't cause a scene," Julian said, his gaze unwavering. "He did. There's a difference." His simple validation was so unexpected it made a fresh wave of tears well up. "I should go," she whispered, already making a move to grab her purse. "Please," he said, holding up a hand. Not to command her, but to ask her. "Finish your water, catch your breath." She hesitated, then sank back into her chair. She felt exhausted, as if she had run a marathon. He didn't press her with questions. He didn't offer platitudes. He just sat in a comfortable silence, allowing her the space to pull herself back together. From the corner of his eye, Julian watched her. He had seen the whole thing unfold from his usual post near the kitchen. He often walked the floor, a habit from the early days of his first restaurant, a way to feel the pulse of the room. He had seen the man. Mark, with his flashy watch and loud pronouncements. He had seen the woman, her quiet grace, the way she seemed to shrink in her chair. And he had seen the moment with the coupons. He had seen the man's face twist from smugness to utter contempt. And he had seen her spirit just break. Something inside him, something dormant and calloused over by his own grief, had cracked open. It was a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. Not since his wife, Clara, had been alive. He was Julian Vance, the owner of the Vance Hospitality Group, a man whose name was synonymous with luxury and success. A billionaire. But in that moment, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man who couldn't stand to watch cruelty go unanswered. He saw the raw, painful vulnerability in her eyes, and it resonated with the profound loneliness that had been his constant companion for the past 3 years. After a few minutes, Elara's breathing evened out, and the burning in her cheeks began to subside. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but clear. "You didn't have to do that." "My restaurant, my rules," he said with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And rule number 1 is basic human decency. He failed the test." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I can pay for my meal. I have the money. It would have been everything I have left." The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Julian's expression didn't change, but something softened in his eyes. He understood. He saw not a freeloader, but a person fighting a battle he couldn't begin to imagine. "I told you, it's taken care of," he said gently. "Now, it's cold out. You look shaken. Let me give you a ride home." Panic flared in her chest. "Oh no, I couldn't. You've done too much already. I can take the bus." "The last bus on this route left 10 minutes ago," he stated, a simple fact. "It's no trouble. My car is right outside." He stood, a clear but gentle signal that the discussion was over. He was not asking for permission. He was offering a kindness she was too fragile to refuse. Defeated and strangely relieved, Elara nodded. She followed him out of the restaurant, acutely aware of the hushed quiet that followed them. Julian walked beside her, a subtle shield against the curious stares. The night air was cold, slicing through her thin dress like a blade. She shivered. Without a word, Julian shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled faintly of clean linen and something else, something solid and safe. She clutched it around herself, overwhelmed. His car was not the flashy sports car she might have expected. It was a sleek, black, understated sedan, the kind of car that spoke of quiet wealth, not loud arrogance. He held the door for her. The ride was silent at first. Elara gave him her address, the street name sounding shabby and out of place in the plush leather interior of the car. As they drove away from the glittering lights of downtown into the dimmer, more residential streets, she finally found her voice again. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Julian kept his eyes on the road. "I don't like bullies," he said simply, "and my mother taught me to always help someone who is trying their best." Her use of the coupons wasn't an act of cheapness to him. It was an act of profound, desperate effort. When they pulled up to her building, a tired-looking 3-story walk-up with peeling paint, he put the car in park. He didn't just drop her off. He got out and walked her to the front door. The lobby was dimly lit, the air smelling of dust and damp. "Here we are," she said, turning to hand him his jacket. "Keep it," he said. "You can return it to me." It was a clever excuse, a reason to see her again. An idea, unbidden and sudden, formed in his mind. It was impulsive, perhaps foolish, but it felt right. "You said you're a painter," he stated. She nodded, confused. "Yes." "I have a daughter," he said, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. He rarely spoke of Lily to strangers. "Her birthday is coming up. I was thinking of commissioning a piece for her room, something cheerful." Elara's eyes widened. A commission? A real paying job? It felt like a dream. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," he said. "Come by my office at the restaurant tomorrow. We can discuss it properly. Say 2 o'clock?" He was offering her a lifeline, but he was dressing it up as a business transaction. He was giving her back the dignity that had been stolen from her just an hour before. Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Yes," she breathed. "Okay, 2 o'clock." He gave a small nod, his duty done. "Good night, Elara." He had remembered her name from the reservation. She watched him walk back to his car and drive away, the warmth of his jacket a tangible comfort against her skin. Upstairs in her small apartment, she hung the jacket carefully on the back of a chair. It looked out of place, a piece of another world. For the first time in a very long time, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to take root in the barren soil of her heart. The next day, Elara stood before the imposing glass doors of Aveline, Julian's jacket folded neatly over her arm. Doubt gnawed at her. Maybe he was just being polite. Maybe he would regret his impulsive offer. She almost turned and walked away, but the memory of his kind eyes and the thought of a real commission propelled her forward. She was led not to a manager's cramped office, but up a private elevator to a penthouse suite that overlooked the entire city. Julian was there, not in a suit, but in a simple cashmere sweater and trousers. He stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, a phone to his ear. He saw her, gave a small smile, and ended his call immediately. "Cancel my afternoon," he said into the phone. "Something more important has come up." Elara's heart did a little flip. "This is your office?" she asked, her voice filled with awe as she took in the minimalist art, the sprawling desk, the breathtaking view. "Something like that," he said, deflecting. "Please, sit." He didn't sit behind his desk, creating a barrier. He sat in one of the armchairs opposite her, making them equals. He offered her coffee, which she accepted with a grateful murmur. "About the painting," he began, getting straight to the point. "My daughter, Lily, she's 7. She's had a difficult few years. Her room is very gray. I want to bring some color back into her world." He spoke of his daughter with a deep, aching tenderness that moved Elara. "What does she like?" Elara asked, her professional instincts kicking in. She pulled a small sketchbook and a pencil from her bag. She used to love horses and fields of wildflowers. Her mother— He paused, his throat working. Her mother and she would spend hours in the country. The unspoken grief hung in the room. He was a widower. Suddenly, the sterile luxury of the office made sense. It was the home of a man, living in a world that had lost its color, just like his daughter's room. Elara began to sketch, her hand moving quickly. A field of vibrant lavender and yellow flowers, a hint of a white horse in the distance, a sense of peace and sunshine. Julian watched, mesmerized by the way the image came to life on the page. "Like that," he breathed, pointing to the sketch. "Exactly like that." He offered her a fee that made her gasp. It was more money than she had seen in over a year. "That's too much," she said immediately. "It's the standard rate for a piece of that size." he said firmly, though they both knew he had no idea what the standard rate was. "I don't want a discount, Elara. I want your talent." He gave her an advance in cash. "For supplies," he said, pressing a thick envelope into her hand before she could protest. He insisted she work not in her cramped apartment, but in a spare sunroom in his home. "The light is better there," he reasoned, "and you can meet Lily. See the space for yourself." And so, 2 days later, Elara found herself standing on the doorstep of a house that could only be described as a mansion. It was a modern marvel of glass and stone, set back from the road behind a screen of ancient oak trees. She felt a familiar wave of intimidation. This was a world she did not belong in. A kind-faced housekeeper let her in. The interior was vast, beautiful, and profoundly silent. The silence of a place that was a house, not a home. And then she saw her. A small girl with Julian's blue eyes and a solemn, watchful expression. She sat at the bottom of a grand, sweeping staircase, clutching a worn teddy bear. This was Lily. Julian came down the stairs and crouched beside his daughter. "Lily-bug, this is Miss Elara. She's the artist I told you about. She's going to paint something beautiful for your room." Lily didn't say a word. She just stared at Elara, her gaze unnervingly direct. It was not a hostile stare, but an assessing one. Elara's heart went out to the little girl. She saw a grief that mirrored her own feelings of loss. She didn't try to force a smile or a greeting. She simply gave a small, gentle nod in Lily's direction. "It's nice to meet you, Lily," she said softly. Lily's only response was to hug her bear a little tighter. Julian led Elara to the sunroom. It was a beautiful space, with easels and canvases already set up. He had thought of everything. "Make yourself at home," he said. "Lily, she takes time to warm up. Please don't be offended." "I'm not," Elara assured him, and she meant it. The first few days were quiet. Elara worked, losing herself in the vibrant colors she was mixing. She would see Lily sometimes, a fleeting shadow in a doorway, a small face peering around a corner before quickly disappearing. Elara never pushed. She would simply smile gently if their eyes met, and then return to her work. She learned from the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, that Lily rarely spoke more than a few words at a time since her mother's passing, that she refused to play with the expensive toys Julian bought her, that she spent most of her time in her room, drawing. One afternoon, Elara left her canvas to get a glass of water. When she returned, she saw that Lily had crept into the sunroom. The little girl stood before the large canvas, which was now a swirl of sunrise pinks and deep purples. She reached out a tiny finger, hesitating just inches from the wet paint. Elara held her breath, staying hidden in the doorway. Lily didn't touch it. She just looked, her expression unreadable. Then, as silently as she had appeared, she slipped away, a tiny step forward. The next day, Elara brought a small canvas and a set of child-friendly paints with her. She set them up on a small easel in the corner of the room. She didn't say anything about it. She just left them there, an invitation. For 2 days, the small easel remained untouched. Then, on the third day, Elara was working on the delicate details of a wildflower when she heard a small noise behind her. She turned. Lily was standing at the small easel, a brush in her hand. She was tentatively dabbing bright red paint onto the canvas. She was clumsy, concentrated, and completely absorbed. Elara's heart swelled. She turned back to her own work, giving the child her privacy. They worked in a shared, comfortable silence for nearly an hour. The real breakthrough came a week later. Elara was cleaning her brushes when Lily approached her, holding out a piece of paper. It was a drawing. A wobbly, crayon-drawn picture of a field of flowers, clearly inspired by Elara's painting. But in the middle of the field were two stick figures. One tall, with brown hair like Elara's. One small, with yellow hair like Lily's. They were holding hands. Elara felt a lump form in her throat. She knelt down to be on Lily's level. "This is beautiful, Lily," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Is this for me?" Lily gave a single, solemn nod. Then she did something that stunned Elara. She leaned forward and gave her a quick, shy hug around the neck before running out of the room, as if startled by her own bravery. Elara remained kneeling on the floor, clutching the drawing to her chest. It was the most precious gift she had ever received. It was acceptance. It was trust. When Julian came home that evening, he found her in the sunroom, staring at the drawing which she had carefully taped to her easel. "She gave this to me," Elara said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. Julian looked at the drawing, then at Elara. He saw the genuine, unadulterated happiness in her face. He hadn't seen Lily connect with anyone like this since Clara. "Thank you," he said, and the words were heavy with a meaning that went far beyond the painting. "Thank you for seeing her." That night, Elara couldn't sleep. The big, silent house felt different now. Less intimidating, more hopeful. She padded down to the kitchen for a glass of milk, her footsteps silent on the cold marble floor. A single light was on over the kitchen island. Julian was there, staring into a mug of tea, his shoulders slumped. The powerful CEO was gone. In his place was a lonely, tired man. He looked up as she entered, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head, pouring herself a glass of milk. They stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. "She hasn't drawn anything but gray scribbles for 3 years," Julian said suddenly, his voice rough. "Until you came." "She's a wonderful girl," Elara said softly. "She just needed someone to be quiet with." He managed a small, sad smile. "I try. But I think I fill the silence with the wrong things. Toys, trips she doesn't want. I'm trying to buy her happiness, and she just wants... I don't even know what she wants." "She wants you," Elara said, her voice gentle but sure. "She just doesn't know how to get back to you. And maybe you don't know how to get back to her. The grief is like a fog between you." Julian stared at her, struck by her simple, profound insight. "You understand," he murmured. "I lost everything, too," she admitted, the words tumbling out into the quiet kitchen. "Not in the same way, but I know what it's like to feel like a ghost in your own life." She found herself telling him everything. About her ex, a charismatic man named Richard, who had charmed her, then slowly, methodically dismantled her life. How he'd called her art a silly hobby, how he'd convinced her to invest her small inheritance in his surefire business venture, which then mysteriously failed, taking all her money with it. How, when she finally found the strength to leave, he had systematically destroyed her professional contacts, poisoning the well of her freelance career. "He left me with nothing," she finished, her voice barely a whisper. "Less than nothing. He left me with this belief that I deserved it, that I was worthless." Julian listened without interruption, his expression growing harder, his jaw tightening with a cold fury on her behalf. When she was done, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, he reached across the island and gently covered her hand with his. His touch was warm and firm. "He was wrong," Julian said, his voice low and intense. "Anyone who would do that to you, who would try to extinguish a light like yours, he is the one who is worthless." Now it was his turn. He told her about Clara, about their college romance, about building his empire with her by his side. He spoke of her laugh, of her love for gardening, of the way she could make this giant, empty house feel like a home. He told her about the illness, quick, brutal, and unforgiving, how he had thrown all his money and power at it, but it was the one thing he couldn't fix. "The day she died," he said, his voice cracking. "The silence she left behind was so loud, I thought it would deafen me. It still does, some nights." He looked at Elara, his eyes raw with a grief he had shared with no one. "You and Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're the first quiet I've heard in 3 years." In the hushed stillness of the late-night kitchen, their shared vulnerabilities created a bridge. It was no longer a relationship of benefactor and beneficiary. It was two wounded souls finding a quiet harbor in each other. A bond was forged, deeper than gratitude, more profound than attraction. It was a bond of mutual understanding. The painting was finished a week later. It was magnificent. A field of wildflowers so vibrant they seemed to pulse with life, under a sky of hopeful dawn. A white horse grazed peacefully in the distance. It was a painting of serenity, of a new beginning. Julian and Lily stood before it, hand in hand. Lily was speechless, her eyes wide with wonder. Julian looked from the painting to Elara, his heart full. "It's more than I could have imagined." He insisted on hanging it in Lily's room himself. Elara helped. As they worked, Lily directed them, telling them exactly where it should go. Her voice, though still soft, was confident. The gray room was instantly transformed. Life fell into a new, gentle rhythm. Elara finished the commission, but no one mentioned her leaving. Julian created a new project for her, designing a new logo for one of his hotel chains. It was a real, necessary job, and it allowed her to stay. She became a quiet, constant presence in the house. She and Lily would spend afternoons drawing together. She would have quiet dinners with Julian after Lily was in bed. The cavernous house began to feel smaller, warmer. It started to feel like a home. Elara was beginning to believe she could be happy again. And that was when the past came roaring back. It started with a blog post on a sleazy city gossip site. Billionaire's bizarre charity case, CEO Julian Vance spotted with mystery woman at Avalon. Elara's blood ran cold. The article was written by Mark, the man from the date. He recounted the evening with vicious, skewed detail, painting himself as a victim of a calculating gold digger who had tried to trap him. He described her tacky coupons and desperate eyes. He didn't use her name, but the details were unmistakable. Worse, he described the manager who had stepped in. He had clearly done his research and discovered who Julian was. "One can only wonder," the article concluded, "what a man like Julian Vance is doing with such a person. A new pet project? Or is there something more sordid at play?" Shame and terror washed over Elara in a sickening wave. She felt like she was back at that table, the whole world staring at her. Julian found her in the sunroom, staring at her phone, her face pale as a sheet. He read the article over her shoulder, his expression turning to stone. "Elara," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "this is garbage. This is nothing." "It's not nothing," she cried, jumping to her feet. "This is me, Julian. This is what I bring, trouble, Scandal. I'm dragging you and your name through the mud." "You are doing no such thing," he said firmly. "A pathetic, bitter man is doing this. We will ignore it. It will go away." But it didn't go away. Mark, emboldened by the online attention, doubled down. He realized he had a much bigger story. He started feeding information to more prominent tabloids. The billionaire and the beggar. Julian Vance's secret mistress, a woman with a troubled past. Reporters started showing up at the gates of the estate. The external threat was no longer a whisper, it was a siege. Mark, realizing he had leverage, made his next move. He contacted Julian's head of public relations with a threat, a massive payout, or he would release Elara's full name and a fabricated story about how she had manipulated the grieving billionaire. Blackmail. The pressure mounted. Julian's board members called, concerned about the company's image. Whispers started among the city's elite. Through it all, Julian remained a rock. "Pay him nothing," he commanded his team. "We don't negotiate with vermin." But Elara was crumbling. Every headline, every whispered rumor was a confirmation of her deepest fear. That she was toxic, that she would ruin the first good thing that had happened to her in years. She saw the stress in Julian's face, the way he took calls in hushed, angry tones. She saw the confusion in Lily's eyes when she asked why men with cameras were outside their house. She couldn't bear it. The old, ingrained instinct kicked in. Flee, disappear, protect them by removing herself from the equation. One night, after Julian and Lily were asleep, she made her decision. With a heart that felt like it was shattering into 1,000,000 pieces, she packed her few belongings into a small canvas bag. She went to Lily's room first. The little girl was sleeping soundly, her face peaceful in the soft glow of a nightlight. The painting hung on the wall, a beacon of the happiness Elara was about to destroy. She leaned down and pressed a feather-light kiss to Lily's forehead. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Then she went to her own room and wrote a short, tear-stained note. "Julian, thank you for everything, for your kindness, for your trust, for letting me see the color in the world again. I can't let my past destroy your future. Please don't look for me. This is the only way to protect you and Lily. Goodbye." Elara, she left the note on her pillow, next to the small, crumpled drawing Lily had given her. She crept down the grand staircase, her bag in hand. Each step was an agony. She reached the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. "Where do you think you're going?" The voice came from the darkness of the living room. Julian. He stepped into the light of the foyer. He wasn't angry. His face was etched with a deep, profound hurt. "You were just going to leave?" he asked, his voice raw. "Without a word?" "I left a note," she whispered, clutching her bag like a shield. "A note?" He took a step closer. "Elara, did you think a note would be enough? Did you think I would just let you walk out of my life? Out of Lily's life?" "I have to," she cried, tears streaming down her face now. "Don't you see? I'm the problem. If I'm gone, he has no story. The reporters will leave. It will all stop." "I don't want it to stop," he said, his voice rising with a passion she had never heard from him before. "I want to fight it, but I can't fight it if you're not here. I can't fight for us if you run away." Us. The word hung in the air between them, full of terrifying, wonderful possibility. "There is no us," she sobbed. "I'm a charity case with a bag full of coupons. He was right." "No." Julian closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He gently took the bag from her hand and let it drop to the floor. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You are the kindest, strongest, most talented woman I have ever met. You walked into this house and you brought it back to life. You brought me back to life. Your past does not define you. Your bank account does not define you. That pathetic man does not get to define you. I will not let him." His thumbs stroked her cheeks, wiping away her tears. "Don't run from me, Elara," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Stay. Stay and fight with me." She looked into his eyes, and she saw no pity. She saw love, fierce, protective, and unwavering. And in that moment, her fear was finally eclipsed by a flicker of strength she didn't know she possessed. She gave a small, shaky nod. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." The next morning, Julian Vance did something he rarely did. He called a press conference. He didn't send a lawyer or a publicist. He went himself, and he asked Elara to come with him. "You don't have to," he told her, "but I want them to see you. Not the caricature they've written about, but you." Terrified but resolute, she agreed. She stood by his side, just off stage, as he walked to the podium. The room was a blinding storm of flashing camera lights. Julian didn't look at his notes. He looked directly into the sea of reporters. "I called you here today to address the recent speculation regarding my private life," he began, his voice calm and clear, commanding the room to silence. "You have heard a story about a manipulative woman and a foolish billionaire. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth." He told them everything. He described the scene at his restaurant. He didn't spare Mark, but the focus of his story was, "Elara, I saw a woman being publicly and cruelly humiliated for no reason other than her circumstances. I saw a man trying to break her spirit for his own amusement, and I made a choice. I chose to offer a small act of kindness." He spoke of the painting for his daughter. He spoke of Elara's talent and grace. "The stories you have been fed are the work of a bitter, failed man attempting to profit from his own cruelty. He is trying to weaponize this woman's past, her struggles, against her. He wants you to believe that a person's worth is measured by their bank account. I am here today to tell you that he is wrong." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "This woman, Elara, has shown more dignity, more strength, and more integrity in the face of hardship than anyone I have ever known. She is not a scandal. She is not a victim. She is a survivor. And she is a person I am honored to have in my life and in my daughter's life." He then turned, his eyes finding hers. He held out his hand. "Elara?" Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. Hiding was over. Taking a deep breath, she walked onto the stage and took his hand. A fresh frenzy of flashes erupted, but standing beside him, holding his hand, she didn't feel afraid. She felt seen. Julian squeezed her hand, a silent message of support. He turned back to the reporters. "This is Elara. Any questions you have about her character have been answered. As for the man who started these lies, my legal team will be handling him. That is all." And with that, he led her off the stage, leaving a stunned and silent press corps in their wake. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The public narrative flipped completely. Julian's declaration, so public and heartfelt, painted a clear picture of hero and villain. Mark was universally condemned. His blog was flooded with negative comments, his social media accounts were suspended, and the tabloids that had printed his stories issued retractions. He was disgraced, his 15 minutes of fame ending in infamy. Julian's lawyers filed a suit for defamation and attempted blackmail that left him ruined. The threat was neutralized. The past was finally, truly vanquished. In the quiet weeks that followed, life at the mansion returned to a new normal, a better normal. The cloud of fear that had followed Elara for years was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. She wasn't just Julian's project anymore. She was his partner. She consulted on design choices for his hotels, her artistic eye proving invaluable. She worked with Lily on a mural for the local children's hospital. She had found her voice and her purpose. The house was filled with laughter. Lily chattered away constantly now, a bright, happy child who had found her footing again. One evening, the three of them were sitting in the living room, a fire crackling in the hearth. Elara was sketching in her notepad, Julian was reading a book, and Lily was on the floor, working on a new drawing. Suddenly, Lily got up and walked over to her father. She handed him the drawing. It was a picture of the three of them standing in front of the house. Julian and Elara were holding hands. Lily stood between them, holding both of their other hands. Above their heads, she had drawn a big, yellow sun. "It's our family," Lily announced proudly. Then she looked at Julian, her expression serious. "Daddy," she asked, her voice clear as a bell, "when is Elara going to be my new mommy for real?" The question, so innocent and so direct, hung in the warm air. Elara's pencil froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Julian looked from his daughter's hopeful face to Elara's stunned one. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his face. This was the moment. He had been waiting for the right one. He set his book aside and reached into his pocket. He turned to Elara, his eyes shining with an emotion so deep it made her heart ache. "Lily has a point," he said, his voice soft. "It feels like you've been a part of our family from the first day you walked in here." He got down on one knee on the plush rug in front of her. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was not a huge, blinding diamond. It was a simple, elegant platinum band with a single, perfect sapphire that exactly matched the color of his eyes. It was understated, classic, and beautiful. It was her. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with feeling. "You came into my life when it was gray and silent. You filled it with color and with music. You healed my daughter, and you healed me. I didn't just want to rescue you that night in the restaurant. I think, somewhere deep down, I knew I needed you to rescue me." He took her hand. "I love you. I love the family we have become. I want to make it official. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." Tears were streaming freely down Elara's face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Will you marry me, Elara?" he asked. "Will you be my wife? And will you let Lily call you her mother, for real?" Lily, watching with wide, excited eyes, clasped her hands together. "Say yes," she whispered loudly. Elara laughed through her tears. She looked from Julian's loving, hopeful face to Lily's eager one. This was her family. This was her home. "Yes," she breathed, the word full of all the hope and love in her heart. "Yes, of course, yes." The wedding was not a grand affair for the society pages. It was held 3 months later, in the sprawling garden behind the house, the one Julian's late wife had loved so much. Elara had helped bring it back to life, filling it with vibrant flowers and fragrant herbs. It felt right to start their new chapter there. The guests were few. Mrs. Gable, a few of Julian's closest friends and business partners who had become Elara's friends too. Elara wore a simple, elegant, cream-colored dress. Her hair was woven with small, fresh flowers from the garden. On her wrist, she wore a delicate beaded bracelet that Lily had painstakingly made for her as a wedding gift. Lily was the flower girl, beaming in a yellow dress that matched the sun. She practically skipped down the grassy aisle, scattering rose petals with abandon. Julian stood waiting, his eyes only for Elara. He looked at her, this incredible woman who had survived so much, who had taught him how to live again, and his heart felt like it would burst. They exchanged simple, heartfelt vows under an arch of white roses. They promised not just to love each other, but to protect each other's peace, to champion each other's dreams, and to always be a safe harbor. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Julian didn't just kiss his bride. He knelt down, and together he and Elara wrapped Lily in a huge hug, officially and forever a family of three. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Elara found herself standing by the koi pond, her hand resting on her new husband's arm. Lily was chasing fireflies on the lawn, her laughter echoing in the twilight. She looked at the warm lights of the house, no longer a sterile mansion, but a home, alive and breathing. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, from the cold humiliation of a restaurant table to the warmth of this man's love, from the shame of a handful of coupons to the priceless treasure of a family. Julian followed her gaze. He squeezed her hand, bringing it to his lips. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached her eyes. "I was just thinking," she said, "that sometimes the most broken pieces are just waiting for the right hands to build something beautiful." And in the quiet peace of their garden, surrounded by love, she knew she was finally, completely whole.